Is there an insurance crisis in Florida?
Can you even get insurance in Florida right now?
And if you can, it's going to cost a lot, right?
Well, that depends on a lot of factors such as location, the home, and a whole bunch more. We're going to go over everything you need to know in this video.
So first we want to go over some data just to show you what the different quotes statewide are, countywide, and we'll also look at cities.
So kicking things off, we got information here from Forbes Advisor just to show you the different, states and kind of what those numbers are looking like. And as you can see, Florida, they're showing the average annual cost for a $200,000 dwelling at $1,334. If you go up to $350,000, it's $2,026. If you go up to $500,000, $2,810. This is yearly, and $4,146 a year if your house is $750,000.
And as you can see, Florida is one of the higher states, but it's not the highest state.
Yeah, if you just look at like the $500,000 dwelling, which is probably a little bit above the median sale price in Florida right now. I mean, if you look at like Colorado, they're higher at $3,670 versus Florida at $2,810. You've got, I think Oklahoma's high.
Yeah, Louisiana.
Kansas for that matter. Iowa is pretty comparable. So, I mean, it just depends. Also, one thing to keep in mind, us living in the area of Venice, Florida, it's, going to depend on the location, which we'll get into a little bit, but like our area, I'd say it's maybe a little bit higher than that state average, and some areas will be lower, which we'll get into that data in a little bit.
And the reason why our area is a little bit higher is because you do have a higher risk for like hurricanes flooding because we are on the coast.
And I think one other thing to note is, as you can see from this data, obviously the higher the price of the house, the higher the insurance. So if you want to save some money on insurance, maybe get a house that doesn't cost as much.
Or if you're a cash buyer, you don't necessarily have to have homeowner's insurance, but I mean, we're not advising you on anything like that. But we do know of some people that purchase homes in cash and they just avoid all the flood insurance, homeowners insurance, and then they just keep a separate savings just in case something happens so that you're not completely unprotected.
Before we get into the city data and talk about that, let's talk about if you're able to get insurance. But first, if you are looking to buy or sell a home in the Venice, Sarasota, Inglewood, Northport areas, call, text, or email our team. We would love to help you. We have a lot of people move to the area and we'd like to help you too. And any questions you might have, we'll have answers for you. And if you're finding these videos helpful, that's a great way to support the channel.
Call, text, or email us at any time, 941-221-1897. And if you're looking to buy or sell a home anywhere else in the country, we'll leave a link in the description box below to put you in contact with a vetted realtor in your area.
Yeah, that link is great. You could just answer a few questions and it'll connect you with a realtor that fits exactly what you're looking for in the area that you're looking for. Does not cost you anything extra, and again, it's a great way to support the channel. So the question about being able to get insurance in Florida. Well, obviously, yes, they have rates here showing you, what the average is, and if it was so impossible to get insurance, they wouldn't even have an average, or it would be way, way higher than other states.
And many people, including ourselves, wouldn't have a homeowner's insurance policy, which we do. And I would say our insurance policy, it's pretty similar to what the city average is, even the county average.
And yeah, I mean, the county of Sarasota, which we'll get to in a little bit, is $2,180, which I think that might be a little low, honestly. But yeah, we're sitting at about $2,500 a year. So take that for what it's worth. Our home's not super new, but it's not super old either. It's new-ish. And I think for a lot of people, they're going to be looking at a rate somewhere around that and up, just depending on, again, the factors that are going to matter, such as
if you have an old roof, then you're going to have issues with finding an insurance company that will cover you. An old roof in Florida is 15 years or older, and that's because we have a lot of rain and sunshine and those shingles get brittle. So at 15 years or older, you're going to have a tough time finding an insurance company that will cover you. And if you do, you're going to be paying a lot in homeowners insurance.
Other factors to consider would be the windows, how old are the windows, the home in general, is the home older, are you in a flood zone or not? We'll talk about flood insurance a little bit later. And also, just the location, inland versus not, for closer to the coast, obviously is going to put you a little bit of a higher risk.
Yes, and if you have a hurricane shutters or hurricane impact windows, if your windows are older and it fails the 4-point inspection, then yes, your insurance, it's going to be higher. And
one other thing to note with all of those factors and things like that too is what you'll see on your insurance policy is there's a separate deductible depending on, for a hurricane deductible versus a non-hurricane. And a lot of people ask too, like, what's the hurricane insurance going to be? And that's not the way it's split up on your insurance bill. It's going to be wind And then if you decide to get flood insurance, that, and then there's just your basic, insurance in general. So those are all things that you'll want to make sure you understand and know the difference of. There's not like hurricane insurance, because a lot of things can happen with a hurricane. You could have issues with flooding, which that's different, versus damage from wind, knocking a tree over or a window getting damaged, and then water gets in that way.
The difference, I would say, in the policy is your deductible. So if there is a hurricane, you have a hurricane deductible. If it is for something other than a hurricane, then you have your regular deductible.
Yeah, so to clarify that, there's a hurricane deductible because they classify damage in those situations differently, but there's not hurricane insurance, if that makes sense. So yes, you have nothing to fear. You can get insurance in Florida right now still. It's just a matter of how much is it going to cost and what are you going to need to do to that home to get the insurance if it is an older home. For the vast majority of people, though, that's not going to be a thing like, oh my gosh, I bought this new home and now I can't even get insurance. You would know that beforehand, or, the insurance company would say, hey, this is why you can't get insurance. Do this and you can, unless maybe it has to do with the location or something along those lines, which even then, we haven't seen that happen.
Yes. And if you see in the media, like everyone saying that you can't get your home's insured in Florida, that is not true. We are still able to get insurance coverage here in Florida. It just depends on all those factors we mentioned. And also, there are companies that did leave the state after Hurricane Ian, unfortunately, but we do have some companies also coming to the state as well.
Yeah, and one of the big factors that kind of went into a lot of those companies leaving the state was all the storms. Of course, we're not going to, sugarcoat that in any way, shape, or form. That definitely was a big factor. But then also, there's been some issues with litigation and lawyers and fraudulent claims and things like that that really contributed to that, which, there's some laws that are being put into place to help with that side of the situation. So going forward, hopefully things get better before they get worse. But of course, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know how things are going to play out. But at the end of the day, insurance is here. As you can see, the rates are, pretty comparable to a lot of the United States, maybe on the higher end, but we're not the worst. So should we get into the comparisons?
We'll scroll through the data here so you can see the comparison, but some of the cities that did catch our attention were Bradenton, just because we're so close to Bradenton, and that is $2,100 a year. Homestead is $5,470 a year, which is a little higher.
Definitely one of the highest in the state. I think maybe the highest.
Yes. Miami is also high, $5,315. Ocala is one of the lowest, $1,865. Ocala, it's more in the center of the state. And Tallahassee, $1,655, which Tallahassee's pretty low considering you're
in the panhandle there, which seems to get hit often enough by hurricanes. So that's kind of a little bit of a surprising and interesting one. But I guess it does sit in there a little bit more. But you'll notice a trend there. The further south, generally, the more, especially like Homestead, that's basically as far south as you can get before you get to the Florida Keys. And then Ocala, like Haiti said, you're kind of insulated. You're a little bit more in the middle of the state. You're a little bit further north. Things like that are generally going to help your rate.
And Orlando also, it's more in the middle, but it is a little higher than Ocala at $2,760, which is not bad. And we also have Tampa.
Yeah, that's another big metro worth mentioning, and that is 2,520. And again, that's quite a bit further north versus your Homestead, your Fort Lauderdale, your Miami. All those big metros are going to be quite a bit more. Did we mention Miami? 5,315.
Yes. And also keep in mind, these are just averages for different cities in the state. Your premium is going to depend on many different factors, such as the location, the roof age of the home, windows, things like that. If you have hurricane shutters or hurricane impact windows, the insurance quote is going to vary depending on that.
Yeah, being inland versus not being more inland, even in the same city, could affect it. Being in a flood zone or not in a flood zone. We're going to talk about flood insurance in the next section of this video. The age of the home, is it a brand new home? Yes. And then as far as, like not being able to get insurance, like we mentioned before, that's going to depend on some of those factors, such as, are you in a flood zone? Do you have a really, really old home? Is it maybe a mobile home, in a bad location? Is it in a flood zone? Do you have a roof that's 15 years old or older?
So flood insurance, do you need flood insurance? Do you have to have flood insurance in Florida? The answer is it really depends on your situation. If you're a cash buyer, then you basically can do whatever you want. You don't need to have flood insurance even if you are in a flood zone. But if you're financing, then yes, you do have to have flood insurance if you're in a flood zone. If you're out of the flood zone, then the lender will not require it.
And I guess that brings up the next question is number one, well, questions, I guess. Number one, what would it cost? And number two, should you get it if you don't need to? And I think that's going to depend on the person and having an understanding of the area that you're in, which again is where having a good realtor would come into play to kind of get a sense for within the city that you're in or the area. Maybe you're in a flood zone X, but maybe you have a realtor that really knows that area and says, hey, this area's got pretty close to flooding before. You know, if it flooded, odds are it probably got moved out of that X flood zone. But if you have a realtor that knows the area and kind of the things to look for in the landscaping and things like that, and just the location of the home in relation to the coast, rivers, all these kinds of factors, they can guide you. So again, if you are looking to move to the Venice, Sarasota area, call, text, or email our team. Anywhere else in the United States or Florida,
click the link in the description box below. We'll put you in contact with a vetted realtor in your area. A great example of what Jesse just mentioned is a community in Sarasota that actually was in a flood zone X, and it did get flooded. And many people lost all their belongings. The water basically came to like
about hip height,
yeah, in their houses, lost, you know, they lost belongings, cars, things like that, and they were in a flood zone X.
And that water sat there for about 3 to 4 days, and everywhere else was bone dry just a day later.
And this is a community that has never flooded before.
And that's why it's important to have an understanding of the location. You know, has it flooded in the past? Is it came close to flooding in the past? Especially with new developments and new areas coming in. That sometimes, okay, if you're built here, well, they want to make sure they don't flood, so they build here. That's just the way it goes, you know. So you want to have an awareness of sort of those situations, but also has the area before, like the old one that was there first, before it was built, was there ever any flooding? And keep in mind that this was also, you know, a once in a lifetime type of rain. I think they said it's, you know, once in a 100-year record type of rain for a tropical storm, not a hurricane. So freak things can happen, and you want to make sure you're prepared for those, which is why maybe you would want to consider getting flood insurance, even if you're in that flood zone X.
Yes, and we know a lot of people that do, just basically for peace of mind. They just want to know that they are covered in case something does happen. And just remember, we are in Florida, we are in a peninsula, so chances of getting flooded are there, but if you plan for it and know your area, you'll be fine.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been living in Florida for about 6 years now. We lived in Orlando originally for a little while, and now in Venice for almost, now about 4.5 years, a little over 4.5 years. And we've seen some pretty big storms, tropical storms, Hurricane Ian, which got awfully close. I mean, we were definitely in the outer bands of it for sure. Our house ourselves, we had not seen any flooding. So just to give you some perspective that, you know, a lot of people think when a hurricane comes through, you know, they'll see maybe a news story of like Sarasota recently. And we started seeing people commenting on different YouTube videos, ours included, that, oh, all of Sarasota floods when storm. No, it was one neighborhood out of all of Sarasota. So it's just good to keep that context in mind of like when you see, you know, a news story saying Sarasota flooded, that doesn't mean all of Sarasota. They're usually going to show the worst case scenario. And there's a lot of YouTube channels that do a similar thing. They want to push the doom and gloom side of things and you know, cover the entire state of Florida based on one tiny location. And
then also with social media too, a lot of times, you know, even Floridians will make memes about like how we're all flooded and how we're like basically, you know, there is like one little area in Florida that's dry and everyone else is all flooded. But like a lot of those are memes and people just trying to make fun of the situation and trying to, you know, like have a little lighted situation, even though we understand that it is dangerous and that people do lose their belongings and it's not fun at all.
And some people that put those things out there as well are also trying to keep people from moving to the state to keep the population down too. So those are just some things to consider. But should we talk costs as far as different counties?
Let's do it.
So we'll scroll through here so you can kind of see some of the different costs of the counties, but we'll note some of the, you know, notable ones as far as the cost for flood insurance.
Charlotte County, which is our neighbor county, it's $1,363.
And then on the higher end, you've got Citrus County at $1,589 per year. That sits about an hour north of Tampa on the Gulf Coast.
We have Franklin County, which is up by the Panhandle. That's $1,713.
And then on the lower end, as far as like major metropolitan areas, Orange County, which is a big part of Orlando, Orlando, 546, and then the other part of Orlando would be Seminole County, which is 629. So those do sit on the lower end of the spectrum. I mean, there's definitely lower yet. Volusia County is 524.
And then for Sarasota, which is our county, it's 1,036. We also have Manatee County at 1,057.
And that's where like Bradenton, Lakewood Ranch sits. And then Miami-Dade, you know, would be another one worth noting. And that's actually surprisingly on the lower end, 544. Yes. So that's pretty surprising and interesting because, again, the further south, generally they're going to get hit more often by hurricanes. East Coast is a little bit more susceptible than the West Coast.
And this quote is probably for the more inland Miami-Dade, not, you know, Miami by the beaches and flood zone areas.
Those things are going to average things out a little bit for all of these counties. And again, that's why location really does matter.
If you're looking to buy or sell a home in the Venice, Sarasota areas, make sure to call, text, or email our real estate team, 941-221-1897. We'd love to help you out.
And if you're looking to buy or sell anywhere else in Florida or the entire United States for that matter, click the link in the description, answer a few questions. We'll put you in contact with a realtor that fits exactly what you're looking for in the area that you're looking for, and that does not cost you anything extra, but is a great way to help support the channel so we can keep making videos like this for you.
Of all the places we've been in Florida, and we've been to a lot of places in Florida, Venice is one of our favorites. So if you want to learn more about what's like living in Venice, check out this video right here.
If you found the video helpful, hit that like button and
Live breezy.